Okay, so there is something going on with the projector. Can you just look at the tutorial questions for Chapter 8 first? I'm bringing the technical support to see whether they can help us with that. Okay. So in the meantime, when we are waiting for the technician, what I'm going to do, I'm going to guide you through question 8.3, and then at least you know what you are expected to do, and then after that you can try with your calculator, okay? So the question is, Lifestyle Limited has issued a 3-year bond that pays a coupon of 6.1%. So as I said, if there is no information at all regarding the interest rate, by default, it is quoted annually, right? So 6.1 here is 6.1% per annum. Coupon payments are made semi-annually. Given the market rate of interest of 5.8%, what is the market value of the bond? Okay, so they give you all of the information related to the bond, and it is a coupon-paying bond, right? And then also they ask you a question of the market value of the bond. So in this case, if the question asks you to calculate the market value of the bond, it is similar to asking you to calculate the intrinsic value of the bond, because we believe that the market value should reflect the true value of the bond. Does it make sense? So you are required to calculate the intrinsic value of the bond, and by doing so, we just simply apply the formula that we learned last week about the coupon-paying bond. So before you do anything, can you just help me to draw the timeline of the bond to show what would be the coupon payments that the bondholder is going to receive every half a year, and what will be the face value at the end of the period, which is 3 years. So after you got the timeline, and then we can calculate together. Yep. Can you just quickly draw the timeline? Okay. Yep. That's perfect. Okay, so now I just want to tell you what I'm going to do with that kind of question. Okay, so before you do anything, just do the summary first, and then we draw the timeline. So here we have a 3-year bond, and the coupon payments are made semi-annually. So you know that you need to convert all of the coupon rate as well as the maturity to half a year, right? So your N is equal to 3 years, and it is, oof, it happens again. 6 period, right? 6 half a years. And then the coupon rate, 6.1% per annum, or it is the same as 6.1% divided by 2 per half a year. Yep. Or semi-annually. And then given the market rate, so how are we going to use the market rate for? So remember, our discount rate should be our required rate of return, right? So if the market rate is 5.8%, the required rate of return for every investor in this case would be 5.8%. So this is our discount rate. Okay? So our I is equal to 5.8% per annum, or it is equal to 5.8% divided by 2 per half a year. I do think that I need to use my little icon here. Hey, did you just help me with this? Oh, did you just help me with the project? Yes. Okay, so you're just going to use this one here now? Yeah, so I mean, now I'm changing to you see, that's what happened last time when I mentioned to you. There is an error with smart code. When I just put something, if I put like this, it's easy, but then just take me some time, but then listen. Okay. So it's good. It's good that everything is fixed now. So I'm thinking that I need to use my little tablet here rather than trying to use the other one. Can you see it? Oh. tell me that it happens again. It's not working.
Is it the laptop, is it?
Yeah.
I'll just push it a bit.
Yep. Okay, so you did a summary, and then you got n equals to 6, right? And then we got...
You need to select the cable, so it's VGA.
So let me write it down. N is equal to 6, and then we got the interest equal to, is it 5.8? Right? 5.8 divided by 2. And then we got the coupon rate equal to 6.1. Let me put percent. Yep. Divided by 2. So what would be our coupon payment? 6.1% divided by 2 times 1,000. Right? By default, your face value is 1,000. This one is easy, right? So we just do a simple summary, and later on when you get used to all of the information regarding the bonds, that would be very straightforward for you, okay? So for the first question, I did it very slowly for you, and of course the second one should be much faster. So now we do have all of the information we need. So if you want to quickly draw a timeline, here our n would be 6, so from 0 to 6. Make sense? And the coupon payment that we receive every half a year would be 6.1% divided by 2 times 1,000, which is 30.5. Right? So we got $30.5 coupon every single half a year, including the last semi-annual, the last half a year. Okay? So what do we miss at the end? The face value. So remember, don't forget that. Many people are so happy with the coupon payments calculation, and you happen to forget the face value, which is really important. That's the biggest payment that we receive, right? $1,000 only at the end of the maturity, which is at the end of the last half a year, at the end of year 3. So you're good with this? So when we have that cash flow, the timeline here, what we have to do, we need to calculate the price. Or in this case, the price should be the same as the intrinsic value, which is the same as the market value. The should be market value. So the price, let me put that formula in. The price of the bond. If you think about this, we have that timeline with $30.5 coupon every single half a year. It means that this one is the ordinary annuity, right? So you can apply the ordinary annuity formula to get the present value of all of the coupon payments, plus the present value of the future or the face value payment. And you sum the two, you should be able to get the price. Okay? So if you want to do that using the formula, let me put the formula down again. P is equal to C over I times 1 minus 1 over 1 plus I to the power of n. That's the ordinary annuity present value formula. And then we need to add face value divided by 1 plus I to the power of n. Do we have all of that information? You do, right? You do have C. You do know what is the interest rate. You just simply plug all of the information that we got in black color. You plug it in the formula, you should be able to work out the price. Okay? So before you do any calculation, again, we refer back to the theory last week. What do you expect to see the price? Would that bond be sold at a discount, at a premium, or at par? At a premium. Why should it be sold at a premium? Correct, right? Because the required rate or the market rate is only 5.8% per annum, which is smaller than the coupon rate of 6.1%. It means that the bond is very attractive in terms of the coupon rate compared to the market rate. Agree? So in order to get that attractiveness, actually the bondholder is willing to pay the premium. It means that the bond price is going to be larger than the face value. So whatever number you find, it should be bigger than $1,000. Make sense? So you can simply plug everything in. So I don't think I need to show you this because it's straightforward. And the answer is 1,008.15. Okay? So the solution will be with you after the lecture. So you can just compare 1,008. So now if we refer back to our financial calculator, so we can try to do that together here. Okay, so in order to calculate the bond price of the coupon paying bond or of the zero coupon bond, you can simply use the top 5 functions up here. So what you have to do, as I said, before you do anything, make sure that you clear the memory. Okay, so when you clear the memory, you should see 1 per year. Did you see that? 1 PYR. So just understand that to be 1 per period. Okay? So we are going to input all of the figures regarding the compounding frequency. So if you don't have that number, if you happen to have 12 or 20 or 4, make sure that you convert it back to 1. So now, we can simply plug all of the information we need. So the first one would be n. Our n is equal to 6. You put the number in first, and then you input 6. What would be the interest rate? 2.9. If you don't want to do the calculation in your mind, just do 5.8 divided by 2. Okay? Just to make sure that we don't do any wrong calculation. Here is 2.9, and you input it in. 2.9. Okay? And then we need to calculate PV. So we just leave PV there. What would be our PMT? 30.5? So you can do that because we have already done the calculation. So I can simply put 30.5. Our FV is 1,000. And then you can work out your PV. And your PV is 1,008.15. Okay? All good? So I explained to you last week that because we input our coupon payments as positive, our future value or face value in this case as a positive number, it means that we stand from the point of view of the investor. We pay today and we are going to receive all of the payments in the future. And that's why when you did your calculation, it is shown as a negative number here, okay? But you don't need to worry about that negative number. It's just to show you that that's the payment that we are going to make if we want to receive those cash flows in the future. Okay. So for this question, I hope that is straightforward. Okay. So let me ask you another question related to this. So we all agree that it is the intrinsic value, okay? And it should be the market value of the bond. Let's say that the real market value of the bond is 1,100. So at the moment, the bond is being traded at $1,100, okay? And based on your calculation, it should only worth $1,008. Should we buy that bond or not? Should you buy the bond or should you sell the bond? If you have the bond, you would sell the bond, right? Because you believe that that 1,100 is too high. And that bond will go back to the true price of 1,800. Or the bond price, not 800, $1,008. So the bond price should drop from 1,100 that it is traded at the moment in the market to what it should be, which is $1,008. And that's why we should not buy the bond. Does it make sense? So you can compare what you can calculate with what is traded in the market to make your investment decision. Make sense? Okay, so I have already shown you how to do question 8.3. So shall we do question 8.14? Okay. So question 8.14, just think about that together and then you can try to practice. Pacific Brands Limited issued 10-year bonds 4 years ago. Sorry. Yeah. Yep. That's right. Okay, so basically you asked me how to present your answer in your exam or your test, right? So as I said to many people already, so now I want to talk in the class in front of everyone. So basically what I expect you to do is you have to show me the formula. And of course the formula, I'm going to upload the formula sheet so you know exactly whether that formula is going to be given to you in your test and exam or whether you would have to remember that, okay? So you will see the formula sheet in about 2 or 3 weeks. So at least you know what is there for you. So basically, I don't expect you to memorize, okay? So the formula is given. You just need to show me how you apply that formula by plugging in the number. So when you plug all of the numbers in your formula, for example, you can stop at this part, okay? At the second line here. And then you can give me the final answer. That final answer can come from your financial calculator. It can also come from your normal way of calculating. It doesn't matter. Of course, people can ask me, oh, what happened if I simply use my financial calculator and get the correct answer? I would say that I would give you the mark if you do so. But then if it just happened to be wrong, there is no understanding shown in that final result. And in that case, there is no part mark. So you get either full or 0, and I don't think you want that, right? So if you can show me up to here, and if something was wrong at the end, at least you can get part mark because you have shown your understanding of knowing the formula and knowing the correct numbers to plug in. You just happen to make a mistake at the last step. So at least you can get part mark, okay? So that's what I expect you to know. So as I said to you right at the beginning, the financial calculator should be used to assist your calculation. But it is how the financial calculator is programmed to help with your calculation. So that's why just try to understand the formula, try to apply it, and then in the last stage, you don't need to go through, you don't need to use your calculator and say, okay, what would be the number of 30.5 divided by 0.029? It doesn't matter to me. I just need that formula up here. It means that you understand, and you show me the final one. Is it clear? Okay, that's good. Okay, if you have any question, don't hesitate to interrupt me. Okay. So now we are looking at question 8.14. So we are going through that together, and then you can do the calculation yourself. So Pacific Brand Limited issued 10-year bonds 4 years ago. What does it mean? What would be the remaining maturity? 6 years. Okay? So if you want to draw the timeline, make sure that you draw okay, it was issued 4 years ago. If it is 4 years, we are standing here times 0. And there will be 6 years to maturity, right? But then, of course, it depends on the compounding frequency so that it can convert that years into the number of compounding frequency. At the time of issue, the bonds sold at par. What is the implication here? That's correct. The coupon rate of the bond would be equal to the market rate at that time. So that question, the coupon rate of the bond is given. It was 9.375%. Assuming that it was not given, if I gave you the information of the required rate of return at that time, it would be the same information to you. Agree? Because you know that if the bond was sold at par, the coupon rate should be exactly the same as the required rate of return. So that's why sometimes it's important that you look at this. For this question, this information is redundant. But for some question, if I change that number to market rate, it's important that you know whether it is sold at par or not. right? Okay, today, bonds of similar risk and maturity will pay a coupon rate of 6.25%. What does it mean? The similar risk and maturity bond is paying 6.25% coupon rate. Your bond is paying, would your bond be paying 6.25% or 9.375%? The first number, the top number, or the second one? How many of you believe that this is a coupon rate of your bond? And how many believe that this is a coupon rate of your bond? The first number or the second number is the coupon rate of the bond. The first one, right? Because it was issued 4 years ago. Even now, the situation has changed, and that's why other similar bonds are paying less than your bond. You can't do anything because it was fixed. That coupon rate was fixed 4 years ago, and it's going to be fixed for the next 6 years. So 9.375% is the coupon rate of the bond. So what is that 6.25%? That should be the discount rate, right? Because if it is the coupon rate of other similar bonds, it should be the required rate of return for any investor who wants to hold that kind of bond. Does it make sense? So it means that the bond, that was the Pacific Brands Limited bond, would be more attractive in that sense because it's paying a higher coupon rate. And because of that, it's going to charge higher price. Agree? So now you sort of know what would be the discount rate, what would be the coupon rate, the maturity. Can you work out the market price? Can you try to see whether you can work out the market price? Okay. So N is equal to, what would be our N? 12, that's right, 6 years, and we pay semi-annually. So N is equal to 6 times 2, and it's 12. And how about our discount rate? 6.25 divided by 2, right? And how about the coupon payment? 9.375%. Because we are not using the function in the coupon payment, right? And that's why you have to calculate that. 9.375% divided by 2 times 1,000. The face value is 1,000, and you are required to calculate the PV. Okay, can you do this? So the timeline shouldn't be a problem for you now, right? From 0 to 12. And then you know the coupon every year based on the formula I just shown you. Okay, and the face value at the end. You have to bear with me with this. Okay. Okay. So if you look at the solution, that's exactly what I've just explained to you, right? Nothing different at all. And when you calculate, we all agree that it's going to be sold at premium. And the answer is 1,154.38. Okay? You simply apply the formula and you get the answer here. Okay. So let me tell you one more thing. If you look at this formula, it is nothing different from the formula that we've been using, C over I times 1 minus 1 over 1 plus I to the power of n plus the face value divided by 1 plus I to the power of n. That's the same thing. The formula on the left, this one, It just shows you all of the process if we use C as the annual coupon. So if you want to do half a year coupon, you take C divided by 2. That's what we did, right? So we just put C is half a year coupon payment. So that's why you just need that formula, as long as you remember to convert every coupon payment and the maturity to the compounding frequency. That's all you need to do. So the latter one doesn't matter for you at all, right? They are the same, basically the same formula. Okay? Everything's good? Perfect. So here at least you can see the procedure of applying your financial calculator, but it's not any different from the previous question. So I'm not spending time on that. I want to talk about 820. It is a new question for you. So this question asks you to calculate the yield to maturity. So what is the yield to maturity basically? So the yield to maturity should be understood as the discount rate, okay? This is the discount rate or the yield that the investor is going to receive if he or she is going to hold the bond to maturity. So if that investor decided to hold the bond to maturity, the discount rate is the yield to maturity, okay? Very straightforward. So you will be given all of the 4 out of 5 functions in your financial calculators. You just need to work out the discount rate. Okay? So now, shall we do that? Elders Limited has 4-year bonds outstanding. Coupon rate of 6.6% semi-annually. So just highlight that word so you know that you need to convert again to half a year. So 4-year bonds outstanding, it means that N would be equal to 8. Yep. And pay a coupon rate of 6.6%, it means that the coupon is 6.6% divided by 2 times 1,000. If these bonds are currently selling at 914.89, it means that the price is 914.89. What is the yield to maturity? So they ask you to calculate the yield to maturity of the bond and the effective annual yield. Okay? And of course, the face value is $1,000. It is not mentioned in the question, but it is $1,000 by default. Okay? So how should we do? You do have the information here. You can simply draw a timeline again. If you bought the bond, you are going to receive $33 coupon every half a year, which is 6.6% divided by 2 times 1,000. Right? So the coupon payment every half a year to the end of year 4. And at the end of year 4, there will be $1,000 face value returned to the investor. What is the price that we need to pay today? $914.89. And remember, because it is the price that we have to pay, in order to receive the $33 coupon every period plus the face value, make sure that you understand that it should be an outflow. It is a negative number. Is it good? It should be an outflow for you. So now basically, we are given all of the information here. You can just simply work out your discount rate or your yield to maturity. So as I said to you, it is called yield to maturity because the investor holds the bond to maturity. And that's why he can receive the face value at the end. Is it clear? Okay. So what should be our discount rate? Okay. So as you can see here, the discount rate or the YTM should satisfy the pricing formula. Normally, I would give you the information of the discount rate. I ask you to work out the price. Agree? Now the information of the price is given. You need to work out the interest rate or the discount rate, which is I in your formula. Okay? So we need to find out I, and in this case, the I here is your YTM. Can we do that manually? Too hard for you, right? Because you can see the power is up to 8 here. So it's not straightforward. So that's why I just need you to understand that your I should satisfy this formula. But the way to get the YTM or I should be from your financial calculator. So we use the financial calculator to work out our interest rate. So we do have the other 4 information. We just need to work out the discount rate. So can I give you 15 seconds? Can you try to see whether you can get the discount rate of 4.59? Just quickly do that. Okay. Okay. Do you understand the question now? Can you get the number of 4.59? Okay, that's good. So what would be that number, 4.5954%? Is it per year or per half a year? Per year or per half a year? Half a year, right? Because we are paying the coupon every semi-annually. So that's why that interest rate is half a year. So remember, we quote all of the interest rate per annum. So 4.59% is not good enough as the final answer. So what would be the YTM? You simply times 2. It will show you what would be the annualized YTM. So it is 4.5954% times 2, and you should get the answer of 9.19% as the annualized YTM. Okay? All good? So, one more question. So remember, 9.19% now is per annum. All right? But then remember, our coupon payments are paid semi-annually. So the effective rate, would the effective rate be higher or lower than that number, 9.19%? Higher, because when we compound more frequently, effectively we are going to receive more. You remember back to lecture 1, and I said to you that if you put your money to the bank said to you that the quoted rate is 5% per annum. You will have 2 options. You receive, or your interest rate is compounded every year, or your interest rate is compounded every day. Which one would you prefer? Every day. Why would you prefer everyday payment? You receive more, right? Because you believe that you will receive more in that case. Why would you receive more? Because your effective rate is higher. Right? So that's why after you can calculate the YTM, the next step for you is to calculate the effective annual yield. Okay? And this one is from your lecture 1, where the effective annual yield is the following formula: 1 plus quoted rate divided by m to the power of m minus 1. So what is m? So remember, m is the number of compounding frequency. I can't do anything with that writing, so you have to bear with me. Number of compounding frequencies per year, right? So in this case, it is compounded twice a year, and that's why your m is equal to 2. So if you plug in the formula here, 1 plus quoted rate divided by 2. It is exactly what you can find from your financial calculator. If you don't want to think about that hard, you can simply put that number back, 9.1908% divided by 2 to the power of 2 minus 1, and you should get the answer of 9.4%. And remember, that answer should be higher than the annualized YTM, and that's as we expected. So at least you can double check to see whether you've done right or not, right? So you can check to see whether your effective annual yield is higher or lower than your quoted rate. And it should be higher because we compounded more frequently than yearly. Okay? The next one, realized yield. What is the difference between realized yield and yield to maturity? So remember, again, realized yield is the discount rate. Okay? So in this case, we are going to find the discount rate, the same as the YTM. The only difference is the investor is not going to hold the bond to maturity. The investor is going to sell the bond at a point in time. If the investor keeps the bond to the maturity, the discount rate is the YTM. If the investor is selling the bond prior to the maturity, the discount rate is the realized yield. Is it clear? So now you can see that your timeline will be different because that investor is not going to keep the bond to maturity. He's not going to receive all of the cash flow from the bond. Make sense? So we do that here. Just see whether we can get the answer. Kevin Fan bought 10-year bonds issued by Harvey Norman 5 years ago. Just read that slowly. For 936.05. When did he pay that payment of 936? Today or 5 years ago? 5 years ago he bought that. It means that 5 years ago he paid that amount of money. Agree? So we draw that together. So 5 years ago, is it semi-annually? So that's 5 years. And if you want, it's equal to 10, right? 5 years ago would be 10 periods ago. Agree? And because it is 5 years ago, I put negative, so you know that we are standing here at time 0. Make sense? And because the bond has the maturity of 10 years, it means that the bond is going to due in 10 period or in 5 years. Okay, you happy with this? The next one. As we agreed, he paid $936.05 5 years ago. He paid the amount of money, so shall we put negative? Agree? That's the payment that he made. So he got the bond. So if he bought the bonds 5 years ago, what would he be entitled to receive? The coupon and the face value if he holds to the maturity, right? But then, see whether he can get all of that. So period -9, -8, -7, 1, up to 10. Agree? So after he bought the bond, he will receive the coupon payment. What is the coupon? 8.4% per annum. So what would be the coupon value? 8.4% divided by 2 times 1,000. So he will receive the coupon every period. And he keeps receiving up to 0. Agree? And he was supposed to receive the face value at the end. Did he keep the bond to the maturity? No. He decided to sell the bond today at time 0. So it means that he will receive that coupon payment and the selling price. And after that, he didn't receive anything because he sold the bond, right? So he would not receive anything after the time that he sold the bond. So can you see the difference in the timeline now? So he would receive the coupon payment for 10 periods. And then he will receive the selling price of 1,048.77. So that's his income or inflow. What would be his outflow? 936.05. Can you work out the realized yield now? Can you do that? So now you can think of the face value as the selling price. And the maturity that he's holding is 5 years or 10 periods. Okay? All good? So let me show you. Where to get it? Okay. So if you look at that, right? This one is his buying price. 936.05. That's the buying price. That's the same with the YTM calculation. You pay the price today, and you receive the inflows. So he is going to receive 10 periods of coupon, as you can see here, because he's holding for 5 years. So that's why he's going to receive 10 coupons in total. And at the end of the maturity of his holding period, he's going to sell the bond to get $1,048.77. And your realized yield will simply be your discount rate I. Okay? Is it clear? So can you do that kind of question? As long as you can draw the timeline, you know exactly what you should put in your formula, right? So when you want to work out the discount rate, again, you plug in your financial calculator. What should we plug in? 936.05. Negative would be the PV. Agree? The N is 10. We need to find the discount rate. What would be the PMT? 42. What would be our face value or future value? 1,048.77. And you should be able to get the interest rate. Okay? Okay. So if you look at the solution here, your interest rate is 5.425%. Should we stop here? No. What would be our next step? The annualized realized yield, right? Again, because this one is only per half a year, we need to show the annualized realized yield. And the annualized yield would be this number times 2, right? And the next step would be the effective yield. So the calculation will be similar to the one that we did in the previous question. Okay? So you can see that the YTM question or the realized yield question are quite similar. If you understand the timeline, they are quite similar. We just need to work out the discount rate. So after you get the discount rate, we need to work out the annualized discount rate and the effective yield. Okay. On good? So can you think about question 8.27? Can I give you 3 minutes to discuss with the person next to you? See whether you can solve the problem quickly. Can you quickly do part A? Okay. Can you work out the market value of the bond in part A? Yes or no? What is the number? Can someone at the back just tell me what is the market price or the intrinsic value of that bond? Think about that. Would the bond be sold at premium, at a discount, or at par? What do you think? The coupon is 6.4%. The required return is 7.6%. The bond should be sold at a discount, correct, right? Because the investor actually required much more than the coupon value or coupon rate. So it should be below $1,000. What is the value? Okay, so I can quickly show you here. I don't think that's a hard question, so I'm not going to go through that again. You are given all of the information of the coupon, the maturity, the discount rate, so you should be able to get the $924. Okay? The hard one would be the second part. Now, assume that the bond is callable after 5 years. What does it mean by callable? Okay. So, you can think about, in week 12, I'm going to talk about options. But at the moment, you can understand, if the bond is callable, it means that the issuer has the right to buy the bonds back at a fixed price. Okay? So here, the bond is callable at an 8.5% premium. It means that the issuer can make a decision whether that firm wants to buy back the bonds at a price of 1,000 times 1 plus 8.5%, which is 1,085. Okay? So the issuer has the right to do that. The issuer can choose not to do so. It depends on the market. Okay? But let's say that I issue the bond to you with that term in the contract, that if I want, in 5 years, I can buy back the bonds from you at $1,085. Even if at that time in the market, the bond was $2,000, you still have to sell back to me and only receive $1,085. Does it make sense? So that's the term in the contract. So it means that if you are the investor, even if you wish to hold the bond to maturity, it depends on whether the issuer would call the bond back or not. If that issuer decided to buy the bond back, it means that you have to sell the bond. So as the issuer, I have the option to buy back or not. But as the investor, if I decided to buy back, you have to sell back. You don't have the option. So you have the obligation. I, as the issuer, have the option. Okay? So why would you want to do that? As the investor, everything will come with the price. Agree? So maybe my bond would be really attractive to you at that point in time, and that's why you are willing to buy my bonds and give me that extra option. Or maybe you believe that there is no chance that I would call your bond back because the bond price would not reach $1,085. If at that time the bond price is $1,000, as the issuer, I would not buy back from you and pay you $1,085. Agree? If I want to buy, I go to the market and buy and pay the market price. But if at that time the bond is so expensive in the market, $2,000 in the market, I would buy back from you and simply sell it and get $2,000. Does it make sense here? So you can understand this as another question of realized yield. If the bond is called after 5 years, it means that you would have to sell the bond and receive $1,085. And then you can calculate your realized yield. That would be your expected return. Is it clear? Is it clear or not? Okay? So I show you the answer here. So if you think about this, if you think about that, we pay the price today and we buy the bond. But then if the bond is called after 5 years, we would have to sell the bond to get that price. So it's actually the calculation of the realized yield. So do you think you can do that at home? Easy for you, right? So before I move on to the next question, I think there is one more thing that I need to clarify to everyone. So I got a question earlier regarding our previous question. That previous question we get -10, 0, and 10. You remember this question? And then I said to 5 years ago and today, and then he decided to sell the bonds today. Okay? And I asked you to input the bond price at this time as the future value. And the bond price at this point is present value. Okay? So I had a question. Some people asked me, this point in time is time 0, is present. Should I put it as present value? Why would I do that as future value? So again, let me confirm. Our concept of present and future values are relative. So what it means by relative is that if you know the number 5 years ago or 10 period ago, our number today relatively is the future value of that number 5 years ago. Make sense? So you are standing today in the present. You are actually the future of yourself in the past. Make sense? And you are the past of yourself in the future. Is it too philosophical? Maybe not, right? So understand that concept as a relative concept. So present is not time zero. Present is in the relation compared with the information that you have. If I give you all of the future information, whatever value that you need to find before that period will be present value. After that period will be future value. Is it clear? Okay? So just try not to stick it with the term present, past, and future. We are thinking about them relatively. Okay. Okay, so for this question, as I explained to you, we just need to find out the realized yield, right? So we move on to question 8.30. So for this question, again, it's similar to the previous one. I would like you to read at home because it's quite similar. You are required to calculate the price. You are required to calculate the realized yield. And the last one would be, if you bought the bond today, what is your expected rate of return? So only for the last step, for part C. Let's say that if you are the investor and you decided to buy a bond, and that bond can be callable in 10 years. All right? And I ask you a question, what would be your expected return? So remember, in this case, there will be two scenarios. If the bond is not called in 10 years, it means that your expected return will be your YTM. You will keep that to the maturity. Agree? There will be a second scenario when the bond is called by the issuer. And in this case, your expected return will be the realized yield when the bond is called. That's it. That's the only difficult part in part C. So in part C, it's just a summary of the two scenarios when your bond is held to maturity or when your bond is sold prior to the maturity. Okay? So question 8.30 would be similar to the previous one. Now we are looking at chapter 9. So with chapter 9 questions, we are going to calculate the share price. So chapter 8 questions, we focus on the bond price. And now we are looking at the share price. The concept will be the same. We are going to forecast the future cash flow. Okay? So 9.15. Your required rate of return is 23%. Your R is equal to 23%. Okay? The company has just paid a dividend of $3.12. So the dividend is $3.12 and expect to grow at a constant rate of 5%. And they ask you, what would be the price of the bond 3 years from now? Okay? So that's the question. Before you do any calculation, look at the question. They ask you to calculate the price 3 years from now. What would be our relevant future cash flows? So we are standing here today, time 0, and you know that if you bought the share, you are going to receive dividend every period, and there is no maturity related to the share. It will go to infinity, right? So D1 of D2, D3, D4, D5. So they want you to calculate P3. Okay? So you need to calculate P3. What would be the relevant cash flow? Would D1 be relevant in your calculation? If you are the investor and you will buy the share at times 3, you pay the price at times 3, would you care about the past dividend? Would you be able to receive the past dividend? No, right? The earliest dividend that you are going to receive would be, if you bought the share in P3, what would be your first dividend received? D3, D4, D5, which one? D4, right? So we bought the share in times 3, and we started to receive the dividend in time 4. So basically, our future cash flow would not be D1 and D2. So as I said to you, D1 is the future cash flow if we bought the share today. But it's not our future cash flow if we bought the share in 3 years. So for us, only D4, D5, D6 would be relevant. Agree? So D5 is equal to D4 times 1 plus G. D6 is equal to D5 times 1 plus G. Okay? So you need to find the present value at times 3 of D4, D5, D6 to D infinity. Yeah? What is the pattern of our cash flow? D4, D5 is D4 times 1 plus T. D6 is D5 times 1 plus T. What is it? To infinity? What is the pattern? Is it an annuity? Is it an annuity? No, it is a perpetuity, right? An annuity would have a finite period, as I said. Is it a finite period? No, it is to infinity, so it is a perpetuity. But it is a growing perpetuity because every period there is a G percentage added back to your previous dividend. So it is growing and perpetuity. So what is the formula then? So your P3, it is equal to D4 divided by 1 plus R plus D5 divided by 1 plus R to the power of 2. Agree? But then, of course, we can't do this calculation. It's going to infinity. Agree? But as I said to you, because it is a growing perpetuity, so what is the formula of the growing perpetuity? P0 is equal to D1 over R minus G. So in this case, your P0, we need to calculate P3. So your P3 is equal to how many periods difference here? 1, right? If you need P3, you need D4. Agree? Because if you look at the formula, we can calculate P0 from D1, so we can calculate P3 from D4. Agree? So it is equivalent to D4 over R minus G. Do we know D4? We don't know D4 yet, but can we calculate from D0? Yes. Do we know R and G? Yes, right? You can work out what is P3, okay? Okay, so the final answer is $31.07. So you simply apply the formula here, you should get the answer. Okay, so the last question that I'm going to explain in class would be the 918. And you can see that after the 918, you still have 2 other questions. You have the 926 and 928. So 926 is the same as the previous question that we did, and 928 is the same as the 918. So that's why I only picked the two to explain in class. And the last two you can easily work out if you understand that in class here. Okay. So now please pay attention to 918 because that's the question that, based on my experience, many people are struggling with. Okay? It's not hard, but somehow people didn't pay enough attention and that's why you didn't get the answer. But it's not hard at all. So we do that together to give you an idea. You are required to calculate the market value of the share. As I said to you, that's another way of asking you to calculate the intrinsic value of the share or the true value of the share. How to calculate this? Based on the future cash flows. Okay. And because you need the value of the share today, the future cash flow would be from your time 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to infinity. Okay? D1, D2, D3, D4, D5, D6. You can do that up to 7, 8. It's up to you. Okay? I explained to you why I stopped at one point in time here. So what would be your D1? What is D1? D1 will be 35% higher than D0. Because you can see that the following growth rate for the next 3 years will be 35%. So D1 will be D0 times 1.35. Yeah? How about D2? D1 times 1.28. D3 will be D2 times 1.22. Agree? How about D4? Will be 9% higher, so D4 would be D3 times 1.09. D5 will be D4 times 1.09. D6 will be D5 times 1.09. Right? So in order to calculate the dividends, all of the dividends here, we only need D0. Agree? Because if you know D0, you can work out D1, you can work out D2 up to infinity. So we just need to know what is D0. Is D0 given? Yes, it is given here. The company paid a dividend 1.75%. Sorry, $1.75. So your D0 is given. D0 is $1.75. Okay? So how about our price? Just do that slowly. Our P, the price of the share, you just discount all of the cash flow back to present, right? So your D1 divided by 1 plus R to the power of 1. You discount that back to present. Are you with me? Okay. D2, 1 plus R to the power of 2. You discount it back to present. Plus D3, 1 plus R to the power of 3. Agree? And you keep doing that. D4, 1 plus R to the power of 4. D5, 1 plus R to the power of 5. And it's going to forever. Right? That's our starting point. Then our next step would be, we have to find some way to deal with that equation, right? Because it's going forever. So it's not going to work for us. So if you look at your timeline here, you can see that at time 1, D1, D1, D2, D3, you can see that the growth rate are different. It means that you have to do that manually. If they are different, you combine them into one calculation. So let me just put that as your phase 1. Because you can see that the growth doesn't follow any pattern at all. 35%, 28%, 22%, it can go, but then it doesn't follow any pattern. So this one is your phase 1. Okay? But then from D4, you can see that it's growing at the same or at a constant rate of 9%. So there is a pattern here. Okay? So it is D4 to infinity here. So that is phase 2. That's the constant growth phase. Okay? So for the first 3 cash flows, you have to calculate the present value manually. Just discount it one by one, and you can get the present value of D1, D2, and D3. So what would be the present value of D4, D5, D6 to infinity? If you refer back to the previous question, D4, D5, D6 are the components of the growing perpetuity. Yes? So can you work out P3, which is the present value 1 period before the first payment of D4? Can you work out the P3? Okay. So this one, you have to give me a number. Let's call it A. Okay? So how about this? Oof. How about this? But at least I report that today again. I did that last time, but it didn't work, so I reported it again. And next time, I believe that we will have Robert to help us to fix it. Okay? So we need the present value of D4, D5, D6. Let me call it B. Okay? So with A, you do that manually. There is no shortcut. With B, how can we do that? We want to get, let me change the color again. You want to get the present value of D4, D5, D6 at times 3 first, because it is 1 period before your first dividend in that phase, which is D4, right? So we need P3 first. What would be our P3? I really hate it. It does look so messy. So P3 is D4 over R minus G. Okay. So P3 is equal to D4 over R minus G. Okay. So can you work out P3? So P3 would be the present value at times 3 of D4, D5, D6 to the infinity. But remember, we need the present value at times 0, not at times 3. What should we do next? So remember that P3 here is the present value of all of D4, D5, D6. But we need the P0. Okay? Okay? I clear that. True. I don't know why I cleared below here, but it just delete everything. Okay? It doesn't matter. So we get from D4, you get the present value at time 3. And this is what we call P3. Okay? And because we don't need P3, we need P0. And this is our B that I just gave you earlier. So we need to sum A and B. So now compare with P0. Would your P3 be future value or present value? That's your future value, right? compare with times 0 times 3 is the future. Agree? Times 0 would be your present. So if you know the future value, can you work out the present value? Can you? So what would be P0? P0 would be P3 divided by 1 plus R to the power of 3, because we have 3 periods difference here. On good? So now if you look at the final calculation, if you look at the final calculation that we have here, okay? So D1, you discount to the present. D2, you discount it back to the present. D3, you do the same. This is your present value of the first phase. Agree? P3 divided by 1 plus R to the power of 3 would be your present value of the constant growth phase. And P3 should be calculated as D4 over R minus T. Is it clear? Okay, so after you do this, and there is no shortcut for you, you will get the answer of 27.35. So you can try to practice those questions at home together with the last 2 questions with your solution. Okay, so try to do that, and then you can compare with the solutions and see whether you can understand. So before we move to the lecture, can you take 5 minutes break? So we come back at 31 past 10.
Hi, good morning. I just wanted to add, you can get by doing things manually and breaking down the numbers.
That one is actually that's the way to do it.
Yeah, no.
The CHA?
Yeah, I've tried the cash flow. How do you set the discount rate for the cash flows? You just use that? Yeah, okay.
That's the discount rate.
I've used also the per year times here, which won't break the alternative, but it gives you the annual percentage rate. You need to convert it to normal.
But as long as you know the process, you can change that to how frequently it is.
To whatever, yeah.
But then I don't want to go through that in the class.
No.
It's going to get very
Confusing, yeah.
So I'd rather just leave it 1 and then I change everything here. But if you want to leave it 2, and then you can change things up here. That still works.
It still works, yeah.
Yeah.
Glad that you don't need the actual working out. You can, in the exam, you would need to show the formula and then the final answer, because doing anything on here is painful, really painful. So.
Yeah, you just need to show me the formula and the numbers that is put in the formula.
Okay.
And then I will need you to show instead of calculation the formula.
And knowing that cash flow function will save you heaps of time.
Definitely. Well, it's going to be
Listen, they're supposed to be D1 plus R, right? Why is it only R?
No, if you do D1 plus R, you can only get the first dividend. You only get the present value of the first dividend. Here we need the present value of all of the dividends. You see what I mean? If you did D over 1 plus R, you actually discount the dividend for only 1 period. So you can only get the present value of only 1 dividend payment.
Only 1 period.
That's right. Only one dividend payment.
Okay.
So if you draw the timeline, you can only get the D1, present value of D1, with that formula.
Okay.
That's only present value of D1.
So this one is perpetuity.
That's right. Because it's perpetuity, and that's why this P0 equal to D over R will be equal to the whole thing up here. Okay? If you only put D over 1 plus R, you actually ignore all of that from here to here.
Oh, I see.
You only get this up here.
Oh, that's why I can choose this one. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Here we should calculate the realized yield. So we need to calculate the effective annual yield. But why can we just regard this as the realized yield?
So this one is the realized yield, right? But it's not effective. It's just a net annualized when you simply times
the number that you get from your financial calculator by 2. But it doesn't show you the effective yield that you get. Because different investments or different bonds can have the same YTN, but by paying the coupon rate or by paying the coupons different in different periods, whether it is yearly or whether it is half a year, they can actually change the effective yield that the investor is receiving.
So the realized yield should be the effective yield.
No, the realized yield, there will be two things. So this one, this part, you can think about that as the annualized nominal realized yield. Okay? And this one is the realized yield in effective term.
So if we are expected to calculate the realized yield, we should calculate two numbers.
That's correct. You start with the quoted one, and then you calculate the realized, the effective one.
Okay. And another question is this question, but we are not expected to do that. But here,
Oh, yes, please. If you could help me, that would be perfect. I think that should be something together with that calibration, but I don't want to muck around.
it is the issuer had issued a bond 2 years ago, and it is expected to call 5 years.
Okay.
After 5 years, and it's semi-annual, and the price here is this number.
Is it price here or price here?
I remember it's price here, but if it is the price here, I don't know.
If it is a price here, it means that the coupon, the future cash flow will only be from 0 to 3. So the coupon will be every half a year from 0 to 3.
But I also hold that these 2 years.
No, it depends, right? If you pay the price here, you would not hold that for these 2 years. Because if you pay the price here, you could really only hold that here, right?
Yeah.
Unless you pay the price at time minus 2.
No, but I buy this 2 years ago. But
If you buy that 2 years ago, your payment should be from here.
yeah, but
You have to move that here, not here.
I can remember the.
You can come back with the question, maybe
Okay.
after the class. I can explain to you with the question, it will be easier for
Okay,
you.
okay, thank you.
I cannot get the calculator.
Okay, try that. It's 12. I said to you that it shouldn't be 12, right? You see 12 here?
Yeah.
It should be 1. So when you do 1, 1, sit down. Yes. Okay, so now if you clear the memory again, it's 1. And after that, you should get 1. Okay, that's your set. Do you think it will? That would be perfect, definitely. Let's try to with this. This one, you have to draw the timeline like what we do here. So if you bought the bond here, you sell the bond at time 0. Agreed? So this is the selling price. That's the last payment that you would receive. And that's what is the. So when you plug in your financial calculator or when you do this, that 42 will be the coupon payment that you receive every period up to time 0. But then you still receive that price as well because you sell the bond at that time. So you receive that 1,048 for 77 at the end of 5 years holding period, and that's why this is the future value here.
This is the face value or the future value?
The future value. The face value is always $1,000. But then because you sell the bond before you receive the face value, so you are not entitled to receive anything and the face value. After the time that you sell it, you only receive what you get from selling the bond, which is that number. Okay? So the face value or that number will be future value in our calculation.
Because it's the realized yield.
So you are not holding to the maturity, you are not receiving the face value.
So the future value is the face value only happen when it's realized.
When it is YTN. If it is YTN, you receive the face value, right?
Yes.
And the face value will be your future value. But then here, because you sell the bond before you even receive the face value, and that's why you receive this number. And this number is also your future value. compared to this term, the number here will be your future value.
What do you call it? The bank calculation is still
Calculation.
Yeah, you see, it's still in here.
you want to call it weeks or instead of
Okay, I can use the other one. That's fine. I think I use my one. Yeah, thank you very much. I think there's something wrong with this.
I have a question because in the first question.
Sorry, do you mind to come back in the next break? Because I think I have to get back to the lecture.
Just one.
Okay.
Because I don't know why it's 1,000.
Oh, that's
that means
convention.
it means when the company issues the coupon, the default value of the
Face value.
is 1,000.
That's right.
And when is your consultation time?
3 to 5 p.m. on Tuesday.
On Tuesday, and it's the same with the Moodle.
Yes.
That teacher. Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's my name. Okay. 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 So after lecture 1 and lecture 2, we learned about financial maths and we learned about bonds and shares valuation. Today I'm going to follow with the investment decision that the firm is making, which is related to capital budgeting. Okay? So this lecture is the first part of capital budgeting. We are going to cover capital budgeting in 2 different lectures, so this week and next week. So this week I will be with you. From next week, you are going to have lecture Song Yanzu. So he's going to be here from next week until week 11. So I will see you back in week 12. Okay? Okay. So for this week lecture, it is relevant to your chapter 10, and next week lecture, it is chapter 11. So what is capital budgeting? That's the first question that we are going to deal with in this lecture. And then I'm going to talk to you about different criteria that we are going to use in order to make a decision of whether we should accept the project or not. So basically there will be 4 different methods that I'm going to introduce to you. And then we talk about NPV and IRR comparison. And finally, we look at different methods that we are going to use to evaluate the projects of Unequal Lives. Okay. So what is capital budgeting? So capital budgeting, also called project evaluation, relates to the capital investment process. So if you are thinking about, I want to draw, but I don't know whether it's going to work. Okay, so I try the other one here. I think all of the technologies seem to be against me today. Okay, so basically, if you are referring back to lecture 1, we talk about 3 different decisions that the financial manager makes, including investment decision, financing decision, and payout decision, right? So with the investment decision, it is related to what kind of assets or what assets should the firm invest into. So here we are talking about 2 different types of assets, the financial assets and real assets. So last week we talked about shares valuation and bonds valuation. It is related to your financial asset investment. And today we are looking at the capital budgeting, and it is related to the real asset investment. Okay? So what would be the process
what would be the capital budgeting process? So here, as you can see, that we have 5 different steps. We need to generate the investment proposal, and again, we need to estimate the future cash flow of our proposal. And then we want to evaluate our cash flow in terms of what would be the riskiness or what would be the uncertainty related to our cash flow. And then we make a decision of whether we are going forward with that project or we are going to reject the project. Okay? And of course, our decision should be based on a certain criteria that I'm going to explain to you. And you should be aware of the advantages and disadvantages of different criteria. And finally, assuming that we are going to accept the project, the last step would be a continual or ongoing evaluation of the investment projects. Because remember, when we accept the projects, we are based on the current information that is available to us, but then things can change in the future, right? And that's why we need that ongoing evaluation to make sure that we are understanding our project, to see whether that project is still a good project or not. Because if it is not good anymore, we have to abandon our project in the middle. Okay? Okay. So the objective of capital budgeting decision is the same as what we've been talking about. It is to maximize the shareholders' value. So at the end of the day, any decision that we are going to make is in order to maximize the shareholders' value. Okay? So there are 4 different methods or 4 different criteria that we can use to make our decision of whether it is a good project or it is a bad project. Okay? And the 4 of them include the first one, payback method; the second one, accounting rate of return or ARR; the third one is our net present value or NPV. This is the most popular method, and it is going to be used again and again in this unit. So basically, NPV is our focus, and we need to understand the IRR, which is internal rate of return criteria as well. Okay. So in order to demonstrate to you how we are going to apply different criteria in our evaluation, I make several assumptions up here. So first of all, we have 4 different projects, and the lives of each project is the same. So each project will have 5-year life. Okay? So they have the same lives, and that's why we compare them. And in the second part of the lecture, we will focus on the projects of unequal lives. So if you have to compare a project of 5 years with a project of 10 years, how are we going to do that? Okay, that's the second part. In the first part, just only when we have the equal lives project. Okay, so 4 projects, each project will be 5 years, and the discount rate or the cost of capital would be 10%, and those projects are mutually exclusive. Okay. Why is it important to make that assumption of mutually exclusive projects? So before we go to the details of each of the methods that we are going to use, I would like you to really understand the difference between independent projects and mutually exclusive projects. Okay? Independent, mutually exclusive. What does it mean? For example, let's say that, let's assume that you have $1 million. No, let's say that more than that. You are a very rich person. You have, let's say, $10 million. Okay? You have $10 million, and now you just want to find different investments that you can put your money into so you can generate high return. Okay? So let's say that you are thinking of opening a restaurant across the road. And you say, okay, I'm going to open a restaurant over there. It's going to be a good business. But then I still have lots of money. Okay? And I can open another one in the city. I can open another one in Frankston, in Dandenong. So you see that basically you open a restaurant across the road. It doesn't affect your decision of opening another restaurant in the city. As long as all of your restaurants are going to be profitable. Agree? So with the independent projects, it means that the implementation of one project doesn't affect the implementation of the other project. Make sense? How about mutually exclusive project? Let's say you have a house. You just built a house. And now you are thinking of installing an air conditioner in your room. Okay? You have two options. You can use your LG air conditioner or you can use Mitsubishi air conditioner. Okay? So basically, you are not going to install both of them. Agree? You can choose whether you want to buy one brand or the other. You are not going to buy both, because what is the point of having two air conditioners in one room? Agree? So what I'm trying to say to you here is the decision of making an investment, because installing an air conditioner is also one investment that you make, right? Because you should think of all of the costs that you have to pay, electricity cost, installation cost, and all of the benefits that you are going to receive. Whether you are going to feel better in summer, you are going to work better in summer. So we compare the two. So what I'm trying to tell you is that with the mutually exclusive projects, by saying that we are going to invest in one project, we preclude the investment in the other project. So we choose one or the other, not both. Whereas with the independent projects, the implementation of one project doesn't stop you from implementing another project. Okay? So how are they important in our investment decision? With the independent projects, basically the firms can choose any profitable project. If all of the projects are independent, as long as they are profitable, they are good, they should be accepted. Agree? How about the mutually exclusive projects? The two projects are good, but because we can only choose one project, we have to choose the better one. Okay? So that's basically what it means by independent and mutually exclusive. And it will affect your answer if the projects are independent or mutually exclusive. Because now you have to make a decision of whether you are going to choose all of the good ones or you are going to choose the best one. Make sense? Okay, so that's the definition of independent and mutually exclusive projects. And in our example here, A, B, C, and D are the 4 projects that we are going to investigate, and they are mutually exclusive. It means that you will choose the best project out of the 4. Okay? Okay, so here are the cash flow of the 4 projects. With the first method, the payback method, what does it mean by payback method? With the payback method, it's going to measure the payback period. And the payback period for a project is the number of years that it would take to recover the initial cash outlay. So remember, the initial cash outlay would be the initial investment, the investment that the firm would make right at the beginning. Is it inflow or outflow? Outflow, of course, right? Because it's the investment that you make. You have to make an outflow first to be able to expect an inflow. So how to measure the payback period? If you come back to the cash flows of the 4 different projects, with the first one, the initial cash outlay is $1,000. It's an outflow, that's why it is a negative number. How long does it take to recover that $1,000? 2 years. Easy for you to see, right? With the second one, how long? 4 years. With the third one? 4 years. With D? 3 years. So which one should we prefer? A. Because the earlier that we are going to recover our initial investment, the better it is. That is based on the payback method. Is it straightforward? Very easy, right? So how to understand the formula here? For this question, I give you a very simple. Okay. If it is not going to work, I'm going to write using my document camera. Can you, oh. Okay, can you see that? So how should we understand? So you follow that with me, okay? So we have project A. Okay? We have project A. Year 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Can you see that? Okay, just do that here. So minus 1,000, 100, 900, 100, minus 100, and number 5, minus 400. Is it enough? Okay, so what we are saying is that by the end of year 2, we are going to recover everything. Okay? So let me change the question. Let me change that number from 900 to 1,800. Can you see that? If it is not 900 that we are making in year 2, if it is 1,800 that is generated in year 2, what is our payback period? What do you think? So by the end of year 1 year passed, we still need to recover 900. Agree? How much did we recover in year 2? 1,800. It means that our payback period is 1.5 years. And that's exactly the equation or the formula that you receive in your lecture slide. Okay? So you can see that sometimes it is a round number that you can see 2 years, 3 years, and 4 years. But then in reality, it's not going to be that exact number. And in this example, it's going to be 1.5 years. It can be 1.33 years. It doesn't stop you from calculating. Okay, is it clear? Okay, so now we go back to our lecture. Okay, so we agree that the payback period would be 2 years for project A, and that's why we choose project A, because it's the shortest time that we need to recover our investment. What would be the disadvantages of this method that you can think of? Very obvious disadvantage. That's right. We don't take into account time value of money, right? It doesn't matter whether they create in year 0 or year 1. We assume that $300 today is the same as $300 tomorrow, and definitely it is the major disadvantage of the method. Okay? What would be the second disadvantage of the payback period? We only consider the cash flow up to the time that we recover fully our initial investment. And we totally ignore any cash flow that we incur after that. So if you look at our example here, it seems that we only need 2 years to recover our initial investment. But then you see in year 4 and year 5, there are negative cash flows or cash outflow coming out from the firm investment. And if you look at C, it takes C 4 years to recover the initial investment, but the majority of the cash flow comes from year 5, right? So we totally ignore all of the cash flow that occur after the payback period. And it is the second disadvantage of the method, okay? So how about the accounting rate of return? So with the accounting rate of return, there will be a number of ways that we can use to calculate the ARR. That's not the only way that we can use, but because it is the common way, and that's why I introduce in here. And you can see the same method in your textbook as well, okay? But that's not the only one ARR calculation. So what is the formula? ARR is equal to average net income divided by average book value, okay? So it is based on the average net income of the project divided by the average book value of the project, okay? So for this demonstration, I make the assumption, and that's why you can see that it's the same as the cash flow, but we all know that profit is not the same as cash flow, okay? So for simplicity, we assume that cash flows are accounting profits, but in fact they are not. So if cash flow are the same as accounting profit, and the book value is the same as the initial outlay, what would be our ARR? Okay. Average net income would be the average of those 5 numbers here, and divided by the average book value of 1,000. And you should be able to get the ARR. Okay? So you can see that we take the average of the 5 numbers, and we divide it by the average of the book value, which is assumed to be the initial investment of $1,000. And you can get the ARR. Okay. So with the payback method, we measure the time to recover the initial outlay. With the accounting rate of return, we measure the percentage return. Not the year, right? We measure the percentage. Okay. And if you just simply compare ARR of the 4 different projects, which one should we choose? The highest one or the lowest one? Highest one, of course, right? And we are going to pick project B. So what would be the problems of this method? So here you can see that we got, the first problem would be accounting profits are not cash flow. And if you bring it back to lecture 1, we said that we need to maximize the shareholders' value, not to maximize the profit, because they are not the same, right? So by saying so, this method is not consistent with our goal of maximizing the shareholders' wealth. And that's the second disadvantage of this method. It hasn't got any theoretical backup. So we don't know what is the link between the ARR and our goal of maximizing the shareholders' wealth, because we agree that maximizing profit is totally different from maximizing the shareholders' wealth. Are you with me? Okay, that's another problem. And again, this method doesn't take into account the time value of money. We take the average by simply summing the net income over different time divided by the number of years. So we don't take into account the time value of money. So the first method and this one don't take into account the time value of money. Okay. Now we come to the one that we use the most in the unit and in finance as a whole. That's NPV. And even though we haven't talked about NPV explicitly, but we mentioned that in your lecture 1 and lecture 2 via the present value calculation. Okay? So what is NPV? So if you think about the name, net present value. We know the word present value. We know how to calculate present value. What is net present value? The word net, just to tell you that we care about the present value of both outflow and inflow. Okay? Because at a point in time now, the project can incur both inflow and outflow. It's not like your investment in the bond and the share, where you know that you pay the price today and there will be inflow in the future. You don't need to do any maintenance to get the share. Agree? So there will not be ongoing cost. With the project, it is a different story. There might be inflow and outflow at the same point in time. Because at one point in time, you may have to pay the salary to the people who are working for your project, and then you can generate the income which will bring your inflow. So when we calculate the present value of the project, we need to take into account both outflow and inflow, and that's why we use the word net present value. Okay? So net present value is nothing different from present value, but we take into account both inflow and outflow. Is it clear? Okay, so if you look at the formula here, you can see that in order to calculate the net present value, we calculate the present value of all of the cash flow of the project. So here, remember, as long as the cash flows are relevant to the project, it should be a part of your calculation. And that's why if there is an investment from the beginning, it should be calculated as well. And that's why you have NCF at time 0. You don't need to start from time 1 because the cost of the project is incurred at time 0. Agree? So here, the present value of all of the cash flows would be, if you draw the timeline, just think about the timeline again. Okay. If you draw the timeline of the project, let's say that your project has n number of years. N can be 5 years, 10 years, it doesn't matter, just put N. All right? So from time 0, time 1, time 2, up to time N. So at time 1, at time 0, there will be initial outlay at least. So that's our outflow. Normally we just put I0, your initial outlay. And you can call them, it is the same as net cash flow at time 0. Agree? At time 1, there will be cash inflow. There can also be cash outflow. Agree? And the difference between inflow and outflow will tell you net cash flow at time 1. Right? And then you have net cash flow at time 2 up to net cash flow at time N. Okay? So what would be the net present value? If you can't see it, let me know. So the net present value would be the present value of net cash flow 0 plus present value of net cash flow 1 up to present value of net cash flow N. What? You see this? Agree? So what would be the present value of net cash flow 0? It occurs at time 0. So the present value of net cash flow at time 0 stay the same, right? $100 today is $100 at the time value, right? So it is the same as net cash flow at time 0. Net cash flow at time 1, when you want to calculate the present value, you need to discount for 1 period. And you keep doing the same up to the last one, NCFN divided by 1 plus R to the power of N. Agree? And I've shown you how to use your financial calculator to do that. If you remember, we've been using your CFJ function. Shall we do that one more time? Just to recall your memory of what we did. Okay. Can you try NPV of project A? Yep, project A. Okay. Okay. So now we do that together. Remember to clear your memory before you start. So with project A, in the first cash flow at time 0 is minus 1,000. So we put 1,000 in. Minus. Good. And CFJ. Yep. And can you see the CF0 appears after that? And you keep doing the same thing, 100. CFJ again, and you can see CF1. So you key in the number first, and you key in the function. That's the step. 900, CFJ, and it is CF2. 100, CFJ, minus 100, CFJ, and minus 400. Okay, all good? So in order to calculate the net present value, we need the discount rate. What is our discount rate here? Did we assume 10%? 10%, isn't it? Yep, 10%. So we need to input that 10% into our financial calculator. So remember, the function that we are going to use is that I over YR up here. And because we are using that function, the percentage can be ignored by default. So you input 10, interest rate. Can you get it? Okay, so now we need to work out NPV. What is NPV? That's the orange function in the PRC button. So because you need to access that orange function, you have to shift down and put that function. Can you see the number here? Negative 406. All good? So that's exactly what we got here. So remember with NPV, because we take into account inflow and outflow, whatever number that you found, if it is negative, you put negative. If it is positive, you put positive. Don't ignore that negative and positive thing. It's important here. Okay. So what can you tell from this number? NPV is a dollar measure. In this case, it is negative. What does it mean? Does the project generate less than 10%, 10%, or more than 10%? What do you think? How many of you believe that the project actually generated less than 10%? Thank you. More than 10%? It is less than 10%, right? Because 10% is the required rate here. If the project can generate exactly 10%, your NPV should be 0. If the project can generate more than 10%, your NPV will be positive. Otherwise, it's going to be negative. Agree? So remember, our discount rate is the required rate of return. In this case, the project doesn't generate as much as we require. Should we accept that project? Of course not, right? So we only accept the project if the NPV is positive or 0. But in this case, we have mutually exclusive projects. We will choose the project that will give us highest positive NPV, right? We need a highest and positive NPV, and that's why we are going to go with project C. Okay? So you can do the practice at home with the other projects. So with A, I've just shown you. So now, why do we use NPV as our main criteria? So if you are thinking about NPV, NPV is a dollar value measure, right? And if you think about the value additivity, it means that the firm value will be the sum of the value of all of the projects that the firm is making. So basically, if that project is going to add value to the firm, it's consistent with our goal of maximizing the shareholders' value or maximizing the firm value, right? And that's why this one is consistent with our theory. And that's the main criteria that we are going to use to evaluate the project. Okay, the next one would be our NPV profile. What is NPV profile? So with this profile, as you can see here, the vertical axis will tell you the NPV of the project. The horizontal axis will tell you the discount rate of the project. Even before looking at this, the higher the discount rate or the higher the required rate of return, the higher or the lower the NPV, do you think? If we required a higher discount rate, what would be our NPV? Lower the NPV, because we have the inverse relationship between the discount rate and the present value. Okay? So you can see that it is a downward sloping. It's actually a curve, it's not a line. It should be a downward sloping curve, where you can see that when you apply a higher discount rate, we are going to have a lower NPV. At this point in time, at that discount rate here, we have an NPV of 0, right? At this discount rate, we have an NPV of 0. And that discount rate is called IRR, internal rate of return. So the IRR is the discount rate that makes the NPV of the firm equal 0. Okay? So with the NPV profile, the higher the discount rate, the lower the NPV. Okay. So now we are looking at how to calculate the IRR. So as I mentioned to you earlier, IRR is the discount rate that makes an NPV of 0, right? So if you are thinking about the bond valuation, it is quite similar to the way that you calculate the realized yield or the YTN, because we need to calculate the discount rate, right? So if you look at the formula here, you can see that when the NPV is equal to 0, the discount rate R is called the IRR, internal rate of return. Okay? So how to find the IRR? So let's look at the project C. Okay? So what you have to do is you need to discount the cash flow one by one back to present. And the discount rate is unknown. But the sum of all of the present value will be 0. That's how we can find the IRR, right? And it is not straightforward from here, because you can't do that manually. You have to use your financial calculator. But before I tell you how to use your financial calculator, let's think about how the financial calculator works. Because there should be someone who programmed the financial calculator, right? That's why we try to explain to you, rather than close your eyes and use your financial calculator and get the result, okay? So if you are thinking about the way we do, let me ask you, so you are required to find the R. Where is that? Okay. You are required to find the discount rate that make your NPV equal to 0, right? And that discount rate is called IRR. Are you with me? So assuming that you have no idea what the R is, and in fact you have no idea, right? What you can do, you can just simply use one number, assuming that your R is 10%, okay? And you have to calculate NPV. And it just happened that when you plug 10% in the formula, your NPV is positive 800. It's a positive number. What do you think about the IRR? Should be lower or higher than 10%? It should be higher than the 10%, correct? What should we do? We try a higher number, okay? Let's say that you say, okay, I am going to put 20% in, because I know that my IRR should be higher than 10%. Because remember, the higher the discount rate, the lower the NPV. So with 10%, you have a positive NPV. With a higher discount rate, you are going to have a lower NPV. And hopefully it is close to 0, okay? And let's say when you try 20%, your NPV is negative 10. What do you think about the answer? What is your IRR? Between 10 and 20. Will it be closer to 10 or 20? Maybe closer to 20, right? So you try another one. You try R equal to 19%. And then you get an NPV of positive 5. Agree? What do you think about your IRR? Between 19 and 20. Now you have a better guess of what it is, right? At least it is between 19 and 20. It is easier for you to guess rather than between 10 and 20. Agree? So what we have to do, in reality, before you have the financial calculator or the spreadsheet, what they do, they are trying to get an R that will give you a negative NPV, another discount rate that will give you a positive NPV. The closer the two rates, the more accurate your prediction will be, okay? And that's how the financial calculator works. So basically, it is a trial and error process, but it is a good trial and error, where we have to think hard about what would we try next, right? You have to think whether you are going to lower your discount rate or you are going to increase your discount rate, rather than just simply plug a number and hopefully it's 0, right? So that's basically what I put into the next 2 slides, just to show you that we need 2 discount rate. In order to get those 2 discount rate, you may have to try 3 or 4. You would not get those 2 straight away, right? You have to try a couple of things, and then you get an IRR. And you see that between 15 and 25 is not a good guess. And if you have between 20 and 22, it is a good guess. And basically, in order to apply the formula here, as long as you have the distance between the two rates of not more than 5%, that would be good enough. Okay? And in your exam, you don't need to do that. You just need to use your financial calculator to show me your IRR. Okay? So when you do the IRR calculation, do we need to input the cash flow? Yes, right? And the way you input your cash flow is exactly the same as what we did with the NPV. Do we need to input the discount rate? No, because we are looking for the discount rate. So what is the function for IRR? So after you input the cash flow, and you can key in, because I can't turn it on now. Okay. Stop. So I can show you with the financial calculator. It's stuck here, so I can't do that over there. So with the financial calculator, you can see next to the NPV function, the one to the left is the IRR function. Can you see that? Yeah. And after you input the CF or the cash flow, you can simply put the orange shift down and that function, and you should be able to get the IRR. Okay? So you can try to do that at home, and you should be able to get the IRR of all of the projects except project A. Okay, B, C, and D. I'm going to tell you why A is not impossible to calculate from your financial calculator in a minute. Okay, so you can easily get B, C, and D. And which one should we choose? The one that will give us highest or lowest IRR? Highest or lowest IRR? What do you think? So what is our IRR? Think about the NPV of 0. The IRR is the discount rate to make the NPV of 0. It means that it is the rate of return that is generated by the project. Agree? Remember, I said to you that if you plug the 10% in, and if the NPV is positive, it means that we generate more than 10%. If NPV of 0, we generate exactly the discount rate. So here, the IRR will tell you the rate of return that is generated by the project. So should we go with the highest or the lowest IRR? The highest one, right? And the answer here would be, we will choose project D. Okay? So, now we are comparing the 4 different projects, or the 4 different criteria that we've been looking at. Payback method, ARR, NPV, and IRR. You can see that by choosing different criteria, you are ended up choosing different projects. The decision is not going to be consistent. So which one are we choosing? Most of the time, we go with NPV criteria, because as I said to you, it is the criteria that is consistent with our theory, and it takes into account all of the time value of money. Whereas with the first 2 projects, or the first 2 criteria, payback or ARR, it totally ignored the time value of money. Okay? So, with the exercise here, I'm going to upload the solution on Moodle for you, so you can do the exercise. It's similar to the example that I've shown you, so we are not going to spend the time in the class. Okay? So you can try that at home. And I'm going to show you the solution on Moodle for you to practice. Okay. So now we agree that ARR and payback method are not a good methods to use. We should use NPV. So how about IRR? What would be the disadvantages of IRR? Why shouldn't we choose IRR? And whether NPV and IRR will bring you the same decision. So here, with NPV and IRR, what we are saying is that IRR, even though sometimes can provide you as the financial manager with a conflict interest or conflict decision to the NPV criteria, it is used in practice a lot because rather than saying to everyone that the project is making $200 on top of 10%, you can say to the investor that the project is 12% return. So it seems to be more intuitive for the investor to be convinced, right? And that's why the IRR method is used in practice, just to give an idea of how good the project is. But then, if you think about IRR and NPV, both of them take into account the time value of money. When we do the IRR calculation, we actually do the discount, right? So even the IRR calculation or the NPV calculation would take into account the time value of money. But then, not all the time, NPV and IRR will give you the same conclusion. And that's what I try to tell you in those slides here. Okay? So now we are looking at different scenarios when IRR and NPV can provide you with different decisions and explain why it can happen. Okay? So the first situation is when we have mutually exclusive projects. So this is the NPV profile. And we agree that the higher the discount rate, the lower the NPV. You good? Here, because we have two different projects, we have project A, which is your blue curve here. Project B is your red curve here. So if you look at this one as a crossover point, can you see this? At this discount rate, the NPV of the two projects are identical, right? To the left of the point here, it means that if we apply a lower discount rate than 14.3%, you see that the red curve is above the blue curve. It means that to the left of the crossover point, project B will have a higher NPV. So based on NPV, we should choose B. How about to the right of the crossover point? We will have to choose A, because the blue curve is above the red curve, right? So the NPV decision will depend on which discount rate we are going to use. How about the IRR method? IRR for A is 20.7%. IRR for B is 19%. Which one are we choosing? A. So with the IRR criteria, we are always going with project A. With the NPV criteria, it will depend on our choice of discount rate, right? So at least here you know that the two methods do not give you the same conclusion in any case, in every single case. It can give you conflicting decision. And as I said to you, when there is a conflicting decision between the two methods, which one are we going to follow? NPV, right? And now we are looking at other situations of IRR. So there will be, if you look at this method, here we have project A and project B. And based on NPV calculation, Project A will give you $227. Project B will give you 1,600 NPV. The IRR of Project A is higher than IRR of Project B. NPV of Project A is lower than NPV of Project B. So here there is a conflicting decision. Okay? Why is it a conflicting decision? You can see the initial investment here. It can achieve 35% of the 1,000 investment. This one is only 28%, but it is of $10,000 investment. So you can see that due to the difference in the scales of the two projects, the IRR can give you the return on $1 investment, but the NPV can give you the dollar value that it will add to the value of the firm. And that's why when we have two different scales or two projects of different scales, the NPV and the IRR may not give you the same decision. Okay? And again, as I said, we would choose project B in this case, if there is a conflicting decision. The next one will explain why I ask you not to calculate your IRR of project A in your financial calculator. Okay? And the reason is as follows. Okay? So ignore project A for a moment. Just look at project C, for example. If you look at project C, we have initial investment at time 0. And we receive all of the inflow from time 1 to time 5. Okay? Outflow and inflow. Project B, outflow and all inflow. Project D, we start with an outflow and we all receive inflow at the end. So if you think about the switch of the sign of the cash flow, it switched from negative in time 0 to positive in time 1, right? And will it switch again back to negative? No. So you can see that there is only one time when the sign of the cash flow is switched. Is it clear? And in this case, we only have one IRR. If there is only one time when the sign is switched from negative to positive, positive to negative, we only have one IRR. And in that case, you can use your financial calculator. If you think about project A, how many times the sign of the cash flows is switched? From negative to positive, that's the first time. And it keeps positive until the end of year 3. And it switched back to negative. So how many IRRs would that have? 2 IRRs here, because there are 2 times when the signs are switched from negative to positive, positive to negative. Okay? That is when your financial calculator would not work. Are you with me up to now? Okay, so B, C, and D follow a conventional cash flow. And a conventional cash flow would be a negative or a cash outflow at the beginning and all cash inflows at the end. And if the cash flows do not follow that pattern, it is unconventional. And if it is unconventional, we are going to have multiple IRRs. Okay? And when there are multiple IRRs, you don't really know which one you are going to pick, right? You don't really know whether you should pick the lower one or the upper one. And if you look at this example, how many IRRs does the project have? 2, right? Before you do any calculation, there should be 2. So don't bother using your financial calculator. You will see no solution appears, right? So just don't bother doing that, but there will be 2 IRRs. And here, if you use your Excel or you use any statistical program, you can find there will be 2 IRRs One is 8.11%, the other one is 25%. So IRR criteria would not be a good one to use in this case. If you use NPV, it will be easier for you. If you pick a number, if the discount rate is happen to be between this and this, you have a positive NPV, you should choose the project. If your discount rate is lower than 8.11% or higher than 25%, you should not choose the project. Okay? Okay. So, with the reinvestment assumption, it is coming from the way that we calculate our net present value, or our IRR. So if you remember, we say, if you deposit your money to the bank for 2 years, and your discount rate is 10%, it means that all of your interest are reinvested at 10%. Agree? Or at the discount rate. So here your IRR is the discount rate, and that's why by saying the IRR is the discount rate, we are saying that all of the cash flows of the project are reinvested at the IRR. Okay, that's the reinvestment assumption. Okay? So this is the summary of the IRR and NPV, and I've been explaining that, so I'm not going to talk about that. So one more example before we move on to the second part of the lecture. We have 3 different projects here. Which one are you going to choose? Which one? X, right? Very straightforward, okay? So the NPV is the highest. Okay, so optimal project selection. This is a summary again. If you have independent projects, we are going to pick any project that will give you a positive NPV. If we have mutually exclusive projects, we are going to pick the project that will give you a highest and positive NPV. Is it clear? The last one would be capital rationing, and this one is important in reality, but it is not important in practice. What they are saying here is that when there is a constraint in the resources that the firm would have to invest, let's say that if the firm wants to invest into 20 projects and each project is $1 million, the firm only have $10 million. What would they do, right? So there is a constraint. So in theory, if they are all good projects, the firm should be able to borrow to be able to finance all of the projects. In practice, it may not be the case. The firm may not be able to borrow and finance all of the profitable projects. And in this case, the NPV itself may not be a good thing. If you look at this example, if the firm only have $200,000, instead of investing in all of the profitable projects, U, V, Y, and Z, with a positive NPV, the firm would have to make a decision of what would be the best combination of projects to bring them the highest total NPV. Because the firm cannot invest in all U, V, Y, and Z, right? So if they invest in Z, they can only get $22,000 NPV. But if they combine, let's say they combine U and Y, they would get more than $22,000, okay? So that's what it means here, okay? Okay, so now I want to focus on the last part of the lecture on projects of unequal lives. So as I mentioned to you at the beginning, if you have different projects of the same lives, NPV should be the criteria that we use. But if we don't have different projects of the same lives, they have different lives, how should we do? Okay. Start with the first one here. We have 2 projects and they are mutually exclusive. It means that you have to pick one out of the two, A and B. So project A, 2 years. Project B will be 3 years. Okay? In the first step, we have to calculate NPV. So NPV for the two projects would be 0.41 for project A and 0.51 for project B. Okay? And if we only stop here, people would say, yes, we should go with B, because project B will give you a higher NPV. But look at this. Project B will take you longer to realize that amount of money. It will take you 3 years, not 2 years, to be able to get that amount of money. So how to take that into account? So there are 3 different methods. Basically, the concept will stay the same. They don't have the same lives, right? What you have to do is you have to hypothetically make them equal lives so that you can compare. If they have different lives, there is no way that we can compare. But if they have the same lives, we can compare them. Okay? How to make them equal? The 3 methods that I'm going to explain to you are 3 different ways to make the unequalized project become equal theoretically, not practically. Okay? Only in theory when we do the comparison. The first one is called lowest common multiple. Here, we have one project of 2 years, the other project of 3 years. We will choose the lowest common multiple of those 2 numbers, 2 and 3. What would be the lowest common multiple? What would be the number that can divide by both 2 and 3? 6. Agree? What does it mean? It means that we are going to assume that project A will be repeated 3 times, so that the life will be 6 years. Project B will be repeated twice, so that the life will be 6 years. So now when you have that 2 simulated projects, can you calculate the NPV of that project and compare? You can, right? So that's the basic understanding. So now we come back to the way we do it. With project A, as I said, we have to repeat that 3 times. So that's why here you can see that this is the first time. So by the time it is finished, we assume that it is repeated another time, and it is repeated another time. Can you calculate the net cash flow every year from 0 to 6? Minus 10? 6, right? And here in year 2, there will be 6 cash inflow, $6 cash inflow, and minus $10 cash outflow. So the net cash flow would be minus 4. Are you with me? So you can do this, and then you can work out what is the net cash flow for the project A of 6 years. After that, is it easy for you to calculate the NPV? Yes, right? You can just calculate the present value of each of the cash flow and sum them up. You should get the NPV. And with project B, you do the same thing. You repeat that for 2 times, twice. And you can get the net cash flow of the total project of 6 years. And now you compare the 2 net present value of the 2 hypothetical projects of 6 years. Which one are we going to pick? A, right? So your result now is A, not B. Agree? So this is the first one. How about the second method? If you are thinking about the first method of the lowest common multiple, assuming now that you are having one project of 7 years, the other project of 13 years, what is the lowest common multiple? Do you want to replicate each of them for 7 times and 13 times? Of course not, right? And if you are thinking that if we are having 4 or 5 mutually exclusive projects. Your lowest common multiple will be a mad number for you to deal with. So basically, the first one has a lot of disadvantages. So what we are doing in the second method would be, we assume that both of the projects, or all of the projects that we are looking at, will be repeated forever. Okay? So one after one after one, it will be repeated forever. Is it clear? So if they are both repeated forever, what would be the hypothetical life for each of the projects? Infinity. At least they are equal. Can you compare them? You can, right? Now you can compare them easily. And that's exactly what we say in constant change replacement. We assume that our projects will be repeated forever. Is it good? So what would be our process of doing that? Okay. So let me draw the timeline for you for project A and B, and we see how we go, right? So if you look at project A, here, it is a 2-year project, 0, 1, and 2. And then, if you think about that, I'm not sure if I remember exactly the cash flow. Is it minus 10, 6, and 6? Okay. And then we can calculate the NPV at time 0. Agree? Remember now, we say that the project is not 2 years anymore. We are going to repeat that every second year. So every 2 years, you are going to make another project. It means that every 2 years, we are going to receive the NPV 0. Agree? So now the new project, let's call that new project is A infinity, just to distinguish with your A of 2 years. Okay? So now we have the project of 2, 4, to infinity. Okay? So you know that it's going to be, let's see if I can make it off. Okay, I'd rather draw it a bit smaller. Zero, 2, 4, 6 to infinity. You should be able to see all of them. Yep. So the NPV 0, NPV here, will be realized every 2 years. Is it good? So instead of calculating the NPV one time, now you want to calculate the NPV of that infinity project. Okay? So now you look at NPV of project A to the infinity. Okay? Okay, is it clear enough? So you need to calculate the NPV of A to infinity. With the cash flow would be the NPV every 2 years. The same NPV. And I think it was 0.41, is that right? I think based on our calculation, it is 0.41. So every 2 years, there will be $0.41 million realized by the project. And if you look at this pattern, what is it? The same cash flow every 2 years. Perpetuity. Agree? So in order to evaluate the two projects using the CCR method, we are required to calculate the NPV of the hypothetically infinity project. So in order to calculate this, your first step would be to calculate the NPV of the project for 2 years or 3 years. It depends on the question. And after that, you get the NPV of the infinity project. How to get this? You have to use your perpetuity formula. All good? So what is your perpetuity formula? It is the formula that we use, which is the red formula up here. So the NPV infinity is equal to n. Your n is the unadjusted NPV. So n is the NPV that we can calculate normally. That's the NPV 0 that I draw in the timeline. You got it? What is k? The discount rate. What is small n? The original maturity of the project. In this case, it would be 2 years for project A. So can you work out NPV n infinity here? Easy, right? So after you can do this, project A will be 2.36, project B will be 2.05. Which one are we picking up? A. So that's the second method. You got it? Okay, so now we are moving to the last one, which is the third method. This method is the most commonly used. The reason is because it doesn't share the disadvantage of the lowest common multiple, and it can be calculated using your financial calculator. And that's why the third one would be the one that people tend to use a lot. Let me explain to you what would be the rationale behind your third method. Okay? So remember, in all of the three methods, we are making the lives equal, hypothetically. Agree? So the third one is the same as well. So now we are not making them infinity. What we are doing is as follows. We are having project A. Zero, 1, and 2, minus 10, 6, and 6. Agree? And we calculate the NPV of project A, which is equal to 0.41 million. So this one, you can calculate that easily. Okay? And you also have project B of 3 years. I do B in a red color, so at least you can compare the two. I make it a bit smaller. Can you see here's B? Okay. So with B, can someone tell me the cash flow? I don't have the cash flow with me. Minus 10, 4, 4, or 4? 4.75. Okay. So that's your B. All good? So what is the net present value of B? 0.51. Okay, that's good. Okay. So we know that we can't compare the two. We have the NPV A and NPV B, right? And for project A, it is a 2-year project. So what we are saying in the second step, this is our first step, we need to calculate the NPV no matter what. Okay? So in the second step, this is when we are trying to make the life equal. What we are doing is as follows. This is a 2-year project. Okay? So we know that the NPV, is 0.41. Assuming that we are going to create an ordinary annuity, what should be the value for this? Can you see this? So 0.41 is the present value that we can create from our project. Okay? So now if we are making a hypothetical ordinary annuity of PMT, there should be the PMT every year, right? can you work out the value of PMT? If you think about that. If you use your financial calculator, you have the number of years, which is 2 years. Do you know the discount rate? You know that, right? Do you know the PV? Yes. What is the FV? 0, because we don't have anything, any cash flow at the end, right? So FV will be 0. Can you work out PMT? You can, right? So in terms of calculation, it's straightforward. In terms of theory, let's look at A and B. So with project B, there will be a 3-year project. So 0.51, you have PMTB, PMTB, and PMTB. Is it good? So now you can see that we are not comparing 0.41 with 0.51 because they have different lives. What we are comparing is our PMTA and PMTB. And remember, the PMT can be understood as the cash flow of the same cash flow every year. So actually, you are making your project A effectively as a 2 one-year project, right? Your project B will be your 3 one-year projects. Now, can you compare the one-year project with each other? You can, and that's exactly what we do with PMT A and B. Is it clear? So with the third method, we are comparing the PMT, and that's why the name is equivalent, because it doesn't exist. It's just an equivalence way of calculating. It is equivalent annual value. And that's why the name is EVA, because we are calculating an equivalent value every year. So you're good with this? So in terms of calculation, what do we know about that? We need to calculate the net present value of the original project. And then in the second step, you are calculating the ordinary annuity value, and you compare the two. Okay? So if you want to think about this, I just give you another hint just to help you with calculation. So remember your CCR, or your constant chain replacement, your infinity project. It is when you assume that the project is repeated forever, right? So it is equivalent to thinking of this PMT here will be repeated forever. Agree? So basically, with the CCR method, it's actually the net present value of the infinity would be the same as the net present value of the EVA divided by K, because here we have a perpetuity. If you believe that your PMT will be repeated forever. So that's how the two methods are linked. Okay? So when you try the two methods, try to understand that again and see why I talk about the perpetuity here. Because your PMT stays the same every year. If we assume that it's going to be repeated forever, the present value of all of those PMT will give you the NPV of the infinity project. And that's why you have the relationship of the project. So if you can calculate the NPV infinity and the EVA of the PMT, you can see the relation here. And if that relation doesn't hold, it means that one or the other calculation was wrong. Okay? So okay. So that's what we mean by EVA. So in order to calculate EVA, if you don't want to use your financial calculator, That's the formula that you can apply, and you should get exactly the same as what I just showed you how to use your financial calculator. Okay? So